The WRC is one of those rare championships that always goes down to the wire, probably because there's so much variability in the nature of rallying. And that means you always get interesting results in close championship battles, usually through multiple different manufacturers, although it has waned slightly. But there's always a few seasons that really stand out. And while I stand by my statement that 1998 is the best season, it's certainly my favorite season, I can't argue with people's logic that 2003 is the closest and most intense championship fight the WRC has ever seen. From Citroen to Peugeot to Subaru, there were so many different championship rivals all gunning for that title. That's what we're talking about today. But before we can dive into the specifics of the 2003 season, we have to first dive into the specifics of its players, starting with defending champions Marcus Gronholm and his Peugeot. Peugeot returned rallying in 1999 with their 206 WRC, and the two of them won 2 drivers' titles and 3 constructors' titles. And for 2003, he was joined by the man that beat him to the 2001 title, Richard Burns. Then we have the old veterans of Subaru with a new generation of WRX joined by Petter Solberg, and finally, we have the new kids on the block, Citroen with their Xterra WRC. Citroen competed in 2002 with essentially a 4-wheel drive variant of their Xterra kit car, but Peugeot refused to let them compete for a title at the time, because they were, winning it. But for 2003, they were allowed to aim for a championship, and they had a good shot with 2-time winner Carlos Sainz and up-and-coming superstar Sebastian Loeb behind the wheel. Then there was also a new scoring system following the Formula 1 scoring system this year, this time awarding points to the top 8 drivers, 10 points for the win, down to 1 point for 8th. And only the top 2 scoring vehicles from each team are counted, so no matter how many vehicles you drive, I think the max allowed is 3, but only the top 2 can actually be eligible for championship points. And for the French team of Citroen, they had the best start you could ever ask for in the French mountains of Monte Carlo. Both Subarus retired while Gronholm's Peugeot was sent into the wall. Meanwhile, the entire Citroen team ran flawlessly, scoring a 1-2-3 on their full season debut, with Loeb taking the win. But it was a role reversal for Sweden. All of the Citroens had problems, as Colin McRae was their highest finisher in 5th. Meanwhile, Gronholm took a dominant victory, even with damaged steering, which meant that the third round was Turkey, and it hosted its first ever WRC event, and, as you might expect for the first ever event, drama was aplenty. 2 of the fastest drivers from the 2 fastest teams scored no points. The steering on Gronholm's 206 died for realsies this time, and they couldn't fix it, while Loeb was even more embarrassing. He got lost and ran out of fuel. I'm not making that up. The pace notes were not very good because, again, it was the first rally for Turkey, and they got lost, couldn't find a fuel station, couldn't find where they were going, and ran out. Oops. But things weren't much better for Petter Solberg, who retired for the 2nd time in 3 rallies when he decided that a rock would make a good clipping point on a corner. So it was Sainz who took victory ahead of Burns, with the latter's 2nd place finish being enough to move him into the championship lead by 1 point ahead of McRae and 2 points ahead of Sainz. Meanwhile, the 2 French teams of Citroen and Peugeot were separated by just 8 points, with Citroen leading the way. New Zealand was up next, and Peugeot was once again in form, scoring a 1-2 finish. I mean, even a rollover couldn't stop Gronholm, and he won by over a minute ahead of his teammate Burns, and Solberg's first podium of the year. Citroen had yet another catastrophe. McRae was defeated by a fogged-up windshield, and Sainz decided he wanted to play in a farmer's field, which meant neither of them scored points. So Loeb's 4th place was the only result for the Citroen team, as the dream start from Monte Carlo was given a sobering reality check. Argentina was next, and Gronholm destroyed his suspension on a rock. However, he proved why he was a two-time champion after he came back from 6th position to finish 2nd. And then Sainz got a time penalty because his team fixed the car too early, and Peugeot took the lead. But at least his day was better than McRae's when his car caught on fire, and with Loeb scoring no points either in Argentina, Peugeot began to run away with the championship. But then, just as all hope seemed lost for Citroën, Gronholm had back-to-back retirements in Greece and Cyprus. That should have been the golden opportunity for Citroën to claw back their lead. But you know what? Burns and Loeb also ran into problems, only scoring 11 points between them in that time. So instead it was Solberg who got his time to shine with another podium in Greece and his first win of the season in Cyprus. So heading into Germany, the points now stood at Burns leading Sainz by 1 point, with Gronholm a further point behind him, and the top 5 overall were separated by just 14 points for the entire championship. Not that Solberg's momentum would stay for very long, as he only scored a single point in Germany, which made Citroën even happier than they already were. You see, they were looking forward to the second half of the season, as it was much more frequently dotted with tarmac events, instead of the first half's heavy use of gravel and dirt and snow. These tarmac events really helped their lead driver Sebastian Loeb, and while Gronholm beat Burns to 2nd, all eyes were on the Frenchman as he won his 2nd rally of the season in Germany. And while yes, there are a lot more tarmac events in the second half than the first half, they're not all tarmac, as the high-speed jumps of Finland were next, and with Ford winning the event, 2nd place was what mattered for the championship. Solberg and Burns duked it out for the entire rally, as Solberg slowly but surely eroded Burns' lead stage after stage, until they were just 2 seconds apart on the last stage of the rally. The Subaru driver drove superbly and took 2nd by less than 2 seconds over Burns' Peugeot, although his 3rd place was enough to keep him as the championship leader via some brilliant consistency on the Britain's part. Next up was Australia, and the slippery dirt cost Gronholm another chance at victory, making it retirement 6 in a disastrous 2003 campaign. Instead, everyone will be captivated by a brilliant battle between Solberg and Loeb. The two swapped the lead of the rally numerous times over the weekend, but it was Solberg who conquered this time, pulling a 30-second gap on the last day to win the rally, which meant that for the first time in this entire championship, Solberg was on the podium, tied with Sainz at 48 points. Meanwhile, Citroën and Peugeot were fighting harder than ever. And it's not even like Peugeot was having poor results, it's just that Citroën would score 2 or 3 more points every rally. And over the course of the season, that championship margin would get closer and closer until the two of them were tied at 110 points apiece at the end of Australia. So with only 4 rounds left in the season, we've reached sort of a critical point, if you will. If you mess up now, it's difficult to come back from. Well, Solberg and Gronholm both retired, with the Subaru having a fuel system malfunction, and Gronholm making a tire strategy error, sliding into the wall and all but out of the championship. Loeb did not make the same tire mistakes, and thrived in the San Remo rainstorm, winning his 3rd rally of the season and his 4th career win on tarmac. So he had a 100% career win rate on tarmac, and with 2 more paved events to go, you can see why he was optimistic for a championship. Unfortunately for him, that confidence proved to be overconfidence, and he spun off the road in France, costing him 10 minutes and any chance at points. But things started out even worse for Solberg, who crashed into a tree before the rally even began. And then his gearbox broke on day 1, something the mechanics had just 20 minutes to swap out. It seemed like his days in France were done, but his tire strategy in the rain, Loeb's crash, and a brilliant drive ensured the Norwegian would actually take the win, maximizing his points, while a 2nd place for Sainz finally pushed Burns off the championship lead after so long by 3 points. The penultimate rally of the season was in Spain, and the third tarmac rally was raining for the third time, throwing up the usual chaos. Both Peugeots of Burns and Gronholm retired, eliminating Gronholm from contention and throwing Burns' title hopes almost completely out the window. Although his teammates Gilles Panzi kept the Constructors' title alive with a much-needed win. The local hero Carlos Sainz only mustered 2 points, while Loeb chose the wrong tire again, finishing second, which meant that heading into the final round, Peugeot was trailing Citroën by just 5 points, while Loeb was leading 1 point ahead of Solberg and Sainz, who were tied at 62 points apiece. All of this meant that the already dramatic Rally GB was going to be even more dramatic. But just before the rally started, there was a bit of tragedy to it as well. Burns blacked out on the way to his home rally, sending him to the hospital and out of championship contention. He ended up being diagnosed with a brain tumor that would tragically take his life 2 years later. But in 2003, this meant that only 3 drivers could now win the title, and that quickly became 2. Sainz made a mistake on day 1 that sent him off the road, out of the rally, and out of championship contention. Oh, he must really hate Rally GB. For the second time in 5 years, he retires in Rally GB to lose the championship. He had done such a good job staying consistent, maximizing points, minimizing losses, and the one time he makes a driver error that costs him a rally, it's the one that matters for the championship. Oh, that's gotta sting. Oof. So it was Solberg versus Loeb. No matter what, one of them had to be in front of the other to win, and if neither of them scored points, then Loeb would take the championship. And let me tell you, it was a brilliant battle. If 1998 was kind of an anticlimax in terms of actual racing in Britain, this was the opposite. It was a tense showdown between Subaru and Peugeot, and Solberg drove superbly, taking the win ahead of Loeb by 44 seconds to win the championship by a single point, having not led the championship standings until he crossed the line on the final day of Rally GB. Loeb finished second in the championship with Sainz a distant third, giving Citroën their first Constructors' title in just their first full season of the WRC. Pretty damn impressive if you ask me. And you could say the same thing about Solberg. He had an excellent career after 2003, winning 8 more WRC events and taking the World Rally Cross Championship twice in 2014 and 2015. But more noteworthy than his championships is that he's the only person to ever beat Sebastian Loeb in full WRC competition. The Frenchman would absolutely dominate the WRC, taking 9 consecutive championships and 80 rally victories before retiring from full-time competition in 2013. That man has so many different records, and I listed them all. It would take the entire duration of this video, so we're only going to list a few here because that guy is an absolute mad lad. He's won 23 different WRC events, including Catalonia and Germany 9 times. Last year, in 2022, he won the Monte Carlo Rally at nearly 48 years old with Ford to become the oldest WRC winner in history. All of these are records that will probably stand for a very long time, and it all kicked off during the incredibly dramatic and nail-biting 2003 season.